Good morning. Good morning. Happy Wednesday. Happy Wellness Wednesday. And Happy New Year. There's my extra light. Happy New Year. It is 2026. Even though 2026 started last week, for me, this is kind of my new year. I'll explain that in a minute. If you are just now stumbling on my page for the first time, my name is Donna. I'm a mom, a nana, a girlfriend. I am a wellness advocate studying for my Master of Science in Clinical Mental Health Counseling. I own an online activewear boutique, activewear and wellness now boutique, a runner, a jazzerciser, although not for a bit now. I started Wellness Wednesday because I've been in a lifelong journey. I used to say battle, and I'm not sure I like that word anymore. On a lifelong journey with anxiety and depression. And have found over time that, good morning, Miss Beverly, have found over time that sharing what I've learned with others and learning from others like yourself, really just helps us along in our journey. Sometimes what somebody does works for someone else and sometimes it doesn't, but a lot of times we don't get any ideas to try, right? Until we share and we start talking. And that's why Pure Wisdom works, because it helps to have these conversations with others that have experienced in some form or fashion what we experience. That's why it's called Pure Wisdom. And it really, really makes a difference. If you have been following me for a while, then you know that last week my episode was about the whiteboard, which talked about giving blank space or leaving blank space in your upcoming year versus resolutions and goals. Or maybe not necessarily versus those, but in addition to those, leaving blank space for growth, for rest, for whatever. Well, my blank space took it just asserted itself and stepped right in there. I kind of got my butt kicked in the last week and a half with some crud that turned into one of the worst sinus infections I've had in a while. And so this whole topic of I should be further by now took on a whole new meaning for me in the last week. I pretty much lost the wonky this morning already, I see. So hopefully it won't cut me out too much. I essentially spent the first 4 days of the year, on the couch. So I felt like I was starting out a little bit behind already, and still do, but, we're working with it. So, this whole I should be further by now was planned as an overall life concept because we often feel that way. A lot of times, especially in January, because it is a new year and because everybody's talking about new year, new me, goals, resolutions, all these things. If we're going to feel behind or feel like we should be further by now, a lot of times that's when it happens. And then of course there's certain life events that kind of produce that feeling as well. So I had big plans for my school break, which is almost over. I had plans for charging out of the New Year gate on the 2nd, getting a lot of extra stuff done for work, getting a lot of stuff caught up around the house in the rest of my world so that I was ready for school to start next week. And bam, I got clotheslined. And like I said, I lost the first 4 days of the year and day 5 was iffy, due to my proverbial butt kicking. So now I'm like, oh my gosh, I was going to talk about, should I be further by now? I'm like supposed to be further today. What am I going to do now? And so the conversation basically Sunday and Monday, as I started to feel better and started to spend a little more time vertical, the conversation started to look like basically me shooting all over myself. And if you've been following me for a while, you've heard me use that phrase before. I can't claim credit for it. I heard it somewhere else. I can't remember where. But basically I should have done this and I needed to do that. And I still need to do this and I needed to do that. And just literally shooting all over myself about all the things and beating myself up for all the things that didn't get done in the last 4 or 5 days. And then I had to stop. I just had to stop and I had to say, listen, yes, my paycheck is important. Yes, my schoolwork is important. And being prepared for the term to start is important. But rest it doesn't have to be a detour. It was necessary. And just because I was delayed in what I needed to do or what I wanted to do or what I thought I should do, there's that word again, it doesn't mean I may feel like I'm behind, but who's defining that timeline? Really? Who is defining that timeline of behind? Delayed doesn't mean denied. I mean, I am 52 years old and I'm working on my master's. Isn't that proof enough? I actually just saw an acquaintance who posted about being 63 and just graduating from college with their master's. So, and I have a family member who has just started their master's and they are 4 or 5 years older than me. I don't keep track very well anymore. So again, I cannot stress enough, delayed does not mean denied, but that is really how it felt for me this week and what I intended to talk about all along, just from a different perspective. So how many of you have felt this way at the beginning of any new year, or just in a significant life event in general? You know, kids graduate, kids move out, whatever happens, and you find yourself thinking, I should have been further by now. Because I know I've had this thought a lot, but one of the things that I've come to realize is that there is no magic day. We, or the people around us, they, so we or they, we tend to place a lot of significance on specific days like January 1st of the new year, or Mondays, or first days back at something, first day back to school, first day back to work, first day on the new job, first day in a new school, clean slate moments like a new house, a new job, a new whatever, fill in the blank. We place a lot of significance on those as fresh starts, as opportunities to change. And that, when we place that kind of significance on it, we also place a lot of pressure on ourselves and on that moment and all of it. That's a lot of pressure. So what quotes can you think of that tend to reinforce this? For example, the first one that comes to mind is never miss a Monday. But when I was training for half marathons on a regular basis, Monday was my rest day. So while everybody else was like, never miss a Monday, got to get your Monday workout in, I'm like, Monday is my rest day. If you have a quote that you've heard over your lifetime that reinforces that significant day or significant time or that magic day to start over or start fresh, drop in the comments, because I would love to hear it, because I know there's a lot of them out there that I'm not thinking of. But we don't need a magic day, do we? Do we need a magic day? I mean, it's great to plan and it's great to prepare and it's great to be like, this is when it's going to happen. But we don't need a magic day, because progress doesn't require a perfect starting line. And we are not behind just because life or the latest virus or bug didn't cooperate with ours or someone else's imposed timeline. My magic day this year was literally waking up from my first decent night's sleep for a week and feeling like I was halfway human again, and like the fog was starting to lift from my brain. And actually feeling like I could stay upright and vertical for a couple of hours without feeling exhausted. So if you want a magic day, I guess it's really up to us to determine where that magic is and find that magic, versus thinking that it is a certain day of the year that we've now missed. And so now we're eternally behind until that next magic day arrives, right? So the myth here is that we are on some magical timeline that comes, and that myth comes from a lot of different places. It comes from cultural timelines, such as I got to have my own house by age X, and I got to have a family by age Y. Those ticking biological clocks, they often define these magical, mythical timelines. Comparison often provides a timeline, especially this time of year. And our modern culture of productivity that teaches us that we have to use every single minute as wisely as possible, that creates a magical, mythical timeline that we constantly feel that often is just more toxic than anything. And a lot of times part of that is all the shoulds and the needs and the have-tos that I mentioned before. Because these are the things when we're shooting all over ourselves, that no matter what we accomplish, no matter how long our to-do list is or how many items we crossed off on it, or how many days we did it early, weeks, months, we are still constantly telling ourselves we should have done this and we still need to do that. So we don't stop and we don't appreciate and applaud what we've accomplished. We're too busy still feeling behind because of this mythical timeline that we've placed on ourselves or that we've allowed others to place on us. And then when we're sick and we're grieving and we're tired, or we're transitioning from some major thing to another major thing, like, a career to another career or whatever, sometimes even when we feel like we're winning, this thought shows up that says we're not where we should be. We're still behind. It rarely shows up when and if we're actually failing, which we rarely actually are failing, because even if we're behind or even if something doesn't go the way we planned, we're still learning from it, right? I don't get sick very often, y'all. I'm very, very good at taking care of myself and taking steps to prevent a lot of this, but I'm not in control. And when I do get sick, oftentimes I get flatlined. And that's why I work so hard to prevent it, because I know that if it gets a hold of me, it's just going to be a smackdown. But it doesn't mean I failed. Every time I learn something new about myself, every time I'm like, oh yeah, maybe I should have done that. Or, oh, when it really started to get a hold of me was when I stopped doing that for a couple of days. So even when we think we are failing, we really rarely ever are. But we have a tendency, that's when this thought shows up that we're behind and that we need to be doing more, and that we're not doing enough, or we're not doing it well enough, or whatever. So just like the whiteboard, sometimes we need that blank space. Sometimes that blank space is recovery. And I will drop the link to last week's video if you're confused about the whiteboard thing. But sometimes that blank space is recovery. It's integration of, and preparation to move into something else. And sometimes it's just rest. And that's what it was for me this time. That blank space wasn't written in. It wasn't written in. But I'll tell you what, on New Year's Eve, Wednesday afternoon, I was trying to work, and it was, and I just felt run down. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to take the day off. I'm going to take today. I'm going to take tomorrow, New Year's Day, and I'm going to rest, and I'm going to be back at it on the 2nd. And when I finally sat down and rested, that's when my body was like, oh, you think you're getting back up? And so, like I said, just like the whiteboard, sometimes you need that blank space to allow for healing, recovery, preparation, rest, whatever the case may be. And it doesn't mean that nothing happened. And it doesn't mean that time has been wasted, or that you are behind. It means you needed something different than what you told yourself you needed. And I'm a firm believer, I don't know about you, I'm a firm believer that that if we don't take the time to rest when we're supposed to, that it'll be taken for us. And that's, I think, what kind of happened to me. So here's the reality. Did you rest? Did you regroup? Did you just survive the holiday? And I say just loosely because it makes it sound like it's less important than it is. That counts, y'all. That counts. Progress isn't erased just because you weren't productive according to someone else's definition of what that means or what that timeline should have looked like. And starting later doesn't invalidate starting. So just because you start a day later, a week later, 5 years later, it doesn't invalidate the fact that you started, period, full stop. That's it. So you're not behind. And I'm not behind. I feel like it, and I have to keep telling myself no, because that little thought seeps in, and it puts a lot of pressure on myself. But I also know that if I heed to that and I start pushing too hard this early in the game, that it might impede my recovery, and then I'm not going to be where I need to be next week when things get even busier, when my school term starts up and I have to be back to 100%. So it is better for me to remind myself that I have to keep listening to my body for a few more days and not push myself on this mad scramble to make up whatever it is I have in my head that I need to make up. Excuse me. before my body is ready to step up to that plate. So you are not behind. You are human, as am I. And we rarely think about putting healing, rest, or recovery on really long. One of the most important things we can put on it and make sure gets crossed off is taking care of ourselves, is taking that rest or that recovery time if we need it. And if you're a believer, you already know God has his own timeline, and that probably looks nothing like yours. So you can write the list and you can map out the timeline, and we can time block. And we've talked about that before. I'm a time blocker. I was taught very well. But sometimes it just doesn't work. And that doesn't mean we're behind. It means something changed, something shifted, and we needed to take that time to do something different. Not worse, not better, something different. So my invitation to you today is to reflect, and this is short. I am still recovering. This is my best morning yet in a week, probably since the last time you saw me live, and that was iffy. I invite you to reflect. What are you calling lost time? Because I'm famous for that. Oh my gosh, I lost 4 days of my life I'm never going to get back. That was one of the first things out of my mouth. What are you calling lost time that was actually necessary for recovery or rest or breathing room or preparation? And where are you measuring yourself against an imaginary deadline? And I would love for you to answer these questions in the comments if you're willing. If you're not sure you want to share that publicly, you can certainly send me a message. But think about these things. What are you calling lost time that was actually necessary for rest, recovery, preparation? And where are you measuring yourself against an imaginary deadline that you or someone else has imposed on you? Maybe someone you've never met. Maybe someone that coined the term, never miss a Monday or whatever. What imaginary deadlines are you feeling the pressure from that aren't really there? At the end of the day, aren't really there. And like I said, maybe are imposed by some cultural thing that never made any sense to you to begin with. And then what if you're exactly where you're supposed to be today? Today, I like I said, I feel the best that I have felt in a week. Yesterday, I was like, am I going to get over this? What is going on? And then kind of mid-afternoon, it started to shift a little bit and my energy started to perk up. And I was like, okay, here we go. Now I'm on the road to recovery. I still have to be careful, and I still need to listen to my body and make sure I don't push too much. I still need to leave blank space to make sure that I am fully recovered. So on this Wednesday, in my boutique, in my classroom, I can be there 100%. And that means that time wasn't lost. That time was necessary for rest. So I'm not behind. I just started on a different day. That's all. And that's probably what's happening with you right now. If you're feeling like you're behind already, you just started on a different day. You started in a different moment. There is no magic day. Everything forward is new and fresh. And you can start over as many times as you like, or as many times as you need to, as long as you keep starting and you don't give up. Okay, so that's all I have for today. Yes, it's a little bit on the short side, and that's okay. But I want you to remember these things. There is no magic day to begin. There is no deadline for becoming whoever you are, whoever you want to be. And there are no prizes for punishing yourself for needing to rest. You didn't miss your moment. I didn't miss my moment. You're in it every time. So don't shit all over yourselves. Make sure that you are creating that blank space as you need it and using it, and looking forward, not looking back and scrambling in all the things you think that you lost or didn't do or should have done. Next week, we're going to talk about how to start unlearning some of these myths and some of these things and some of these cultural timelines that keep us kind of tied up and keep us from stretching our wings. And until then, I hope you're having a fabulous new year whenever it started. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Be well.